The next step is to dig into the rules of how your employer treats your FSA. And there are several areas where this is important. The first has to do with how you're reimbursed. Again, going back to the complication of FSAs, the biggest hindrance that I've seen is people don't understand how they get their money out of the plan, and this can vary based on your employer. I would say the most complicated way, which can still be managed well, is to pay for it out of your own pocket and then to ask to be reimbursed by the plan. This would involve keeping track of expenses in the same way that you would if you were on a work trip and bought a meal. However, it doesn't necessarily have to be at the time of purchase. I see several people who will save their receipts, put it in a folder, and submit all of it for reimbursement at the end of the calendar year. Whatever works for you, if you're in the reimbursement model, you can again find your system that makes it more easy once you understand how those expenses are paid back to you out of what's in your FSA. Another form that's becoming more popular, especially for larger employers, is an FSA card. And this is comparable to a debit card. If you have a debit card and you have $100 in your account, then you know that you have $100 that you can spend. The same is true with an FSA debit card, where if you've loaded $200 on that card, you can go and you can add that as a payment method on sites like an Amazon or a Walmart. And you can also swipe or insert that card to pay for things like a copay or an out-of-pocket expense that you might incur at a place like a physician's office or a dentist's office. The next portion of the plan rules that you want to dig into is when the plan year expires. Now, for most employers, that's going to be December 31st, but you'll also find that many will offer an extended period or an allowance as well. So, for example, the most common one that you'll see is typically March 15th. So, you'll have an employer that will say all of your FSA eligible expenses have to be submitted for reimbursement by December 31st, but there is an extended period until March 15th that will keep you from having those funds revert to the plan if you didn't meet the original deadline. Now, your employer may or may not offer this extended period, so you want to make sure so that you're not assuming that you have until March 15th when December 31st is truly D-Day for your plan. But the good news is, even if that's the case, an FSA is not a pure use it or lose it plan. We shared in the intro that that's what many people think, but with an FSA, you actually have an allowance period that you can roll over from one plan year to the next. It is not like an HSA where you can roll over the entirety of what's in your plan, but in 2025, you can roll over $660 from one FSA plan year into the following plan year. So when you're considering how much to put aside in an FSA, you don't have to find an amount that you can spend down to zero. You have to choose a conservative number that will allow you to spend what you can spend and come within that $660 threshold. For example, if you've calculated that you can conservatively spend $2,000 from your FSA, you don't have to set your contribution at $2,000. You can set it at $2,660 because if you spend that amount, you'll still be within the threshold and you can carry over that money to the next plan year. If you're planning to max it out at $3,300, be aware that with that $660 allowance, you would need to spend $2,640 towards your health expenses to come within that threshold in the current calendar year.